All right. Welcome, everybody, to the week 3 live session. Tonight, I want to welcome my students as well as any of Miss Heaney's students who are joining our session tonight. Hopefully, she will be back soon, but welcome. So, we've got a lot of ground to cover tonight. I'm going to talk about the first draft assignments a little bit later. But first, some other important things. So first thing I want to do is a little recap of some of the main ideas that we've kind of talked about and touched on over the last 2 weeks in regard to presentation. Oh, actually, no. First, I'm going to talk about this. So the 3.3 discussion board this week. It is not a graded activity. You'll see on the dashboard that it's 0% weight. However, it is an opportunity and a space that we created for you guys as you are building your presentations and looking for resources and information, things like that. A place where you guys can communicate and collaborate and ask questions and answer questions and share helpful resources that might help each other out as far as finding, quality images or video or music or things like that, depending on what it is that you're trying to do. And then if you want to, you can even post your first draft presentation if you finish it up and try to get some feedback from your classmates. So that's what that discussion board is there for. And it should be open. It should be open basically for the rest of the month, for the next 2 weeks. So that's just a space that we want to create for you guys specifically for this time of the month when you're building your presentations. So that's that. Okay. Talk about how to make an impact with your content. Some of the main ideas that we've talked about this week, or excuse me, this month. The first, focus on the audience, right? The audience is king. Audience is the hero, right? Before you do anything, before any presentation is created, you have to first consider who the audience is for your idea or who you're going to be talking to, because that's going to affect everything else that comes after. Once you know exactly who you're talking to, what their needs are, what they're expecting, what they know, what they don't know, what they need, what you can provide, only then can you then start building a presentation that focuses on that audience and that is centered around that audience and that will resonate with that audience. So audience is always the first thing that you need to consider. The more you know about your audience, the better you can tailor your presentation to have an impact on them. So this, one of the other things that we touched on was tell stories. So we talked about sort of the general narrative format, and thinking of presentations as a sort of narrative structure with a clear beginning, middle, and end. There's a hero, there's a mentor, there's a journey that happens, right? But our brains are kind of wired to absorb information in that narrative format. And so if you have an idea that you can frame within the context of a story, then it will have a greater likelihood of resonating with the audience and the audience remembering and understanding the point that you're making through your story. So storytelling is like the number one awesome tool in your presentation toolkit. It's a powerful tool. And now something that we're going to focus on this week and tonight is the idea of show, don't tell. So we're going to focus on, since you're building your first draft of your audio-visual presentation, we're going to talk about visuals, building your visuals, and designing your visuals, as well as a little bit of audio stuff toward the end, since you're going to be recording your voices. Okay, so the first thing we're going to focus on a little bit is the idea of the flow of your content, the structure of your information. Now, in week 1, we talked about sort of the basic beginning, middle, end structure, right? We talked about the sparkline structure. Last week, for those of you in my class, we talked about a little bit about Simon Sinek and the golden circle, why, how, what structure. And then, oh, whoops, I forgot to do something. So want to get an idea of who has watched this week's videos before this evening and who has not. For those of you who are not in my class, don't stress about it. I usually post a list of videos that I want students to watch before our live sessions because I'm going to be referencing a little bit throughout the month or throughout the night. But as I send this along to Kristen Messini, I will also send along my list of videos for her to pass along if you would like to watch them yourself. Okay. It's looking like I'm about half and half. That's okay. Awesome. Okay. So one of the videos on the list was a video called How to Structure a Video Essay. And it was made by a guy named Tony Zhou who produced a YouTube series called Every Frame a Painting, which for any film students or digital cinematography students or creative writing students, definitely check out that web series, Every Frame a Painting. Unfortunately, he's no longer making new episodes, but he was doing it for years, and there's a ton of amazing things in that. But so he made this video for that series. And in the video, he talks about editing, basically, and how he structures his storytelling when he's making films. And he talks about a film essay that Orson Welles created back in the 70s called F for Fake, and how he kind of the lessons that he learned from that film and how he applies those lessons of structure and editing to his own work. And so one of the main ideas that I wanted you to take away from that video specifically was the idea of no and then. Falling into an and then trap in your storytelling and in your structure. So basically what an and then trap is basically a long list of things. So remember, when you're telling stories, in the middle part of the story, there's conflict, there's a tension, there's a back and forth, right? That's why it's, first this thing happens, but something else gets in the way, therefore the hero has to do something else to overcome an obstacle, right? And then trap is kind of like listening to a little kid tell you about their favorite thing. Like, you ever been cornered by like a 4 or 5 year old who's like obsessed with dinosaurs, and they'll like corner you and just talk your ear off about dinosaurs for like 40 minutes. It's kind of like that. It's just this kind of ongoing, first we did this, and then this, and then this, and then, 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 and it just drags on and on and on without any real view of where everything is going. So those are the kinds of things that you want to avoid in your presentations. And I'll tell you the two places that I most often see and then traps. People fall into and then traps. The first is in the beginning of the presentation where they're introducing themselves. Maybe you give a little bit of your background, right? Where you're from, where you've been, things like that. And that's fine. That's good information to have. But you want to keep it to the most relevant pieces of information. What we don't need is a play-by-play retelling of your life from birth to the present. Okay. And so oftentimes I'll get students projects who start off with, hi, my name is Andrew, and I was born in Minnesota, and then when I was 3, my parents moved to Virginia, and I went to this school, and I met these people, and I did this, and then 2 years later we moved to Washington, and then I went to this school, and then I got interested in this, and I met these people, and I did this, and it's just this, and then, and then, and then, and then, and then, and then, and then. So just keep it to the most relevant milestones in your life that led you to where you are. You don't need the play-by-play, day-by-day recount of your life. So that's the first place where I most often see the and then trap pop up. The second place is in the middle, when you're talking about your qualifications, things that you learned, classes that you took at Full Sail in your degree program that are relevant, things like that. It most often happens when you're talking about classes, the things that you learned. So again, depending on what it is that you want to do, if you're going to talk about classes that you took, relevant classes, make sure that you're keeping them to the most relevant of the classes in your degree that are relevant to what it is that you're wanting to do. So for example, if you want to be a film editor, when you're talking about classes that you took in Full Sail or in your degree program, keep it to the ones that are most focused on editing and storytelling, right? Because those are what's most relevant to being a film editor. You do not need to give us a class-by-class account of every single class that you took at Full Sail and a description of each and every single class. That's where this, and then I took this class, and then I took this class, and I learned this, and I took this class, and we did this, and then I took this class, and in that class we learned this, and then I did this, and just that on and on, and then. So give the most relevant piece of information, because remember, you only have 3 to 4 minutes for this presentation, and once you're actually like in there doing it and recording and things like that, it's not a whole lot of time. So you don't want to include extraneous information. Excuse me. Because it's just going to drag down the pace of your presentation. Okay. Okay. So now we're going to talk about something that I'm sure most of you are probably familiar with, these ideas. For anybody who did any kind of like debate in high school or college, you're well aware of these things. We're going to talk about the 3 pillars of public speaking, or 3 persuasive techniques. And those are ethos, which is the appeal to trust or credibility when trying to persuade somebody of something. Then we have pathos or pathos, however you want to pronounce that, which is the appeal to emotion. And then finally we have logos, which is the appeal to logic. So each of these are basically persuasive techniques when you're trying to convince somebody or persuade somebody of something, or to do something, or to take an action of some kind, right? It's how we appeal to the people that we're trying to persuade. So we're going to talk about each of these a little bit. So ethos, first ethos. So this is the appeal to credibility. This is when you're trying to persuade somebody just based on your personal credibility, either through convincing whoever you're talking to that you're trustworthy, or through the level of education or experience that you have, convincing them that you're a person of authority and a person with good intention, basically. So ideas with ethos that comes up is, does the audience respect you? It's very hard. Ethos is really about trust, is what it's really about. Does the audience trust you, right? Because it's very hard to respect somebody that you don't trust, and somebody who you don't feel is credible. You're not going to pay as much attention to whatever they have to say. So it's important that you gain the audience's trust, because that's the first step in getting their respect. Does the audience believe you're of good character? So is it clear that what you have to offer them is being done so for non-selfish reasons, right? Are you there to honestly help them with what you have to offer, or are you just trying to get rich and trying to make a name for yourself, or you have other ulterior motives? Excuse me. Mine went blank for a second. So it's important that the audience feels that you're a good person, basically that you have good intention. Because again, it's very hard to give any credibility to somebody who you don't think is a good person. Does the audience believe you're generally trustworthy? So that kind of goes back to my first point a little bit. But like I said, ethos is really about trust, because you're playing to persuading somebody through the idea that you are convincing them that you're a credible person that they should listen to or believe or follow. And so if you don't have that trust from the audience, if you haven't made that connection with them, then it'll be hard to persuade them that way. And then finally, does the audience believe you're an authority on this speech topic? So are you conveying in any way what it is that makes you an authority? Again, either through the level of education that you have, or level of real world experience, or whatever it may be, level of research you've done, depending on what it is that you're talking about. But have you offered the audience anything that will kind of soothe their concerns that you may not know what you're talking about, right? You say, no, I know what I'm talking about. I studied this for 4 years, and I've done this much research, and I've, whatever it is. Convincing the audience that you're an authority helps them trust that you understand what you're talking about. It helps them to respect the ideas that you're putting forward. And if you're doing so in a way that shows that you have, good intentions, and that you're not just there for yourself, then it would be possible to persuade somebody through ethos. So moving on, next we got pathos, which is the appeal to emotion. So ideas here are, do your words evoke feelings of love or sympathy or fear or any other kind of emotions? Words are powerful, incredibly powerful, and you want to be very careful and very deliberate about the choices of words that you use. Some words have positive connotations, other words have very negative connotations. So you don't want your word choice to accidentally end up working against you in some way by accidentally offending somebody or calling to mind an idea that you don't mean to call to mind for your audience. Words are very, very powerful. Excuse me. Do your visuals evoke feelings of compassion or envy or any other kind of emotion? What kind of emotions are your visuals evoking in the audience? Words are very, very powerful. Images can be even more so, right? Picture's worth 1,000 words kind of thing, right? So be very careful and very deliberate about the images that you choose to show and make sure that it's a clear representation or reflection of the ideas that you're talking about and that it makes sense within the context of your speech. So you don't want to confuse the audience with your visuals. You know, if you're talking about something super serious and kind of somber or emotional, and you are showing the audience, you know, a picture of a basket of puppies or something like that, it's going to create sort of weird cognitive dissonance. Those two things don't go together. Why is he talking about something really sad but showing me something super happy and adorable? So again, be very careful with your visual. Be very deliberate. Make sure that your visuals aren't evoking a feeling or emotion from the audience that you don't intend or that might end up working against you. And then does your characterization of the competition evoke feelings of hate or contempt or whatever? So when you are in situations where you're speaking maybe on one side of an issue or a topic or a debate, whatever it may be, right? There's multiple viewpoints, or at least two. Be careful how you address the opposite viewpoints, the opposite side of your argument, or opposite side of your debate. Okay, because if you're not addressing the opposite side or your competition or whatever, however you want to phrase that, if you're not addressing them with sort of a fairness, I guess, if you're not being fair towards your competition or the other side of your argument, if you haven't honestly taken a look at what their positions are, their points are, whatever their research is, if you haven't honestly taken a look at those things, and the way that you're characterizing them when you're speaking is if you're being very negative about your competition without necessarily giving them a fair shake, that can sort of clue the audience in that you perhaps have a personal bias that you're letting affect your judgment of things. So you want to be very careful how you approach addressing the opposite side of an issue, because you want to make sure that you're doing it in a very fair-handed and even way, and that you're not showing a bias, unintentional, that could harm the audience's view of your credibility in the long run. Excuse me. There's actually a great example of this. There's a TED Talk from a woman named Susan Cain. Actually, I don't remember if this was on the list or not. It might be. Anyway, there's a TED Talk from a woman named Susan Cain called The Power of Introverts. And in that TED Talk, she talks about introverts, right? Kind of explains what it means to be an introvert, how introverts really view the world and the workplace and things like that. And about halfway through her presentation, she stops and says, I think at this point it's important for me to address the extroverts in the crowd and let you know that I have nothing against extroverts, and they're wonderful people, and some of my best friends are extroverts and kind of stuff. But she takes a moment to address the opposite side of the introvert-extrovert issue that she's talking about, and giving the extroverted side of a fair and even handshake, and making sure that she is clear that she's not diminishing extroverts or what it means to be an extrovert or anything like that. She's just, for the purpose of her talk, focusing on what introverts are. It's just a very, very good job of handling that characterization of the opposite side of what she's talking about. Okay, then finally we have logos, which is the appeal to logic. So important ideas here are, does your message make sense? And that seems like a, well, yeah, duh, kind of thing, but you would be surprised. it's important that your message makes sense. Now, I guess a little addendum to this would be, does your message make sense to people other than you? Because yes, in your own brain, everything makes sense, right? For the most part, right? But if you have an idea, you understand it in your own brain, but it's the issue of getting it out of your brain and into your audience's brain where things can get fuzzy. So it's important that your message clearly makes sense to your audience or to other people. Is your message based on facts, statistics, and evidence? Have you done research and can you present that? Or are you just sharing a personal opinion of yours and haven't really looked up anything else about it yourself? That stuff is important if you're trying to convince people based on logic, okay? Verifiable facts and statistics and evidence from credible sources, and not just, Joe Schmo blogs blogging out of their mom's basement or people's just personal opinions on things. Hard evidence and facts go a long way to convincing somebody when you're trying to use logic, but it needs to be coming from sources that are outside of yourself, right? Because if you're just talking about your own opinion of things and you have nothing credible to really support or back up what you're saying that comes from somebody other than you, then it's kind of a why should we be listening to you in the first place kind of thing. If it seems like you haven't really done your homework on what it is you're talking about, then again, that's something else that can hurt your credibility, but can definitely hurt the logic end of things. And then finally, will your call to action lead to the desired outcome that you promised? So maybe you're doing an awesome job from the beginning and the audience is following you along through your beginning and your middle and you're making sense and connecting points and things like that. But at the very end, your call to action, you say, if we do this, we come together, whatever, then this will be, this could be what the outcome is. If whatever that thing is at the end, that desired outcome that you're describing, if that doesn't line up with everything else that you've talked about before, if you're making some wild leap in logic at the very end, you're going to lose the audience right at the end. So everything needs to make sense from the beginning, clearly all the way through your call to action and end. Okay, so here's the thing. Different people respond differently to to each of these types of appeals. Some people respond more to credibility or to ethos than they do pathos. Some respond more to pathos than logos, and around. So actually, let me ask you guys, which rhetorical appeal do you think you respond to most, or tends to convince you more often? Looks like pathos is in the lead. Okay. Oh, got a couple more voting in. Okay. So we got, at this point, with 85% of you voting, we got pathos in the lead at 64%, and ethos and logos both tied at 18%, which is actually not surprising. Pathos is probably the most powerful of these three, and is often the one that is most misused or abused even. Yeah, when you can make somebody feel something viscerally towards you or towards your idea, positive or negative, to be honest, that's a powerful thing. Emotions are yeah, they're a powerful thing. Oh, Mike, don't get ahead of me. We'll get to that. So yeah, different people respond differently. Now, these ideas go back thousands and thousands of years, like all the way back to Aristotle. Now, Aristotle himself personally thought that if you wanted to persuade somebody of something or convince somebody of something, the only appeal you should need is logos. That if what you're saying makes logical sense, everything else around it logically lines up, then you should be able to persuade somebody or convince somebody of something just using logic. However, even he admitted that since not everybody responds the same way to all three of these ideas or all three of these techniques, that if you want to have the widest impact possible on a group of people or an audience, that if you can incorporate ethos, pathos, and logos into your delivery, then you should have that win. Now, what's interesting about this, well, first of all, one of the other videos that I included in that was a video that showed some examples of how these ideas are utilized in advertising and commercials. Because I know some of these ideas are maybe a little bit abstract, so seeing them being used, how they're being used in the real world, maybe gives you a little better grasp of those things. But what's interesting about these ideas, ethos, pathos, logos, goes back to something that we talked about last week when we were talking about Simon Sinek and the golden circle idea, the why, how, what. And what's interesting about that is that the ideas, these rhetorical appeals, very coincidentally, happen to line up perfectly with the golden circle. Or pathos, starting with why, is the pathos. That's the emotional side, where you're talking to that center emotional part of the brain that's responsible for decision making and all that kind of stuff, right? Ethos being the credibility, being the how level, and then logos being the logical level of things with the what circle. So that's one of the reasons why that why, how, what structure works so well and is so effective for this style of presentation, is because it allows you to incorporate all three of those persuasive techniques all in the same structure. So I thought that was kind of cool. All right. So now we're going to talk about something called amplifying the signal, cutting through the noise. So basically, if any of you are audio people, then you're probably familiar with a term called signal flow, which is basically the path that a signal travels from its origination to wherever it's supposed to end up. So, for example, if you're in a recording studio and recording vocals for a song, right? The signal flow for that would be the signal starts in your throat, in your vocal cords, comes out of your mouth, into the microphone in your recording booth, through the microphone wires and whatever instruments and software and equipment are in the recording studio, and then onto whatever the final recording medium is, whether it's digital or tape or what have you. Right. And so if there's a problem when it comes out at the ends, then you can trace the signal back through all the places where it goes through and try to find where the problem is. So that's sort of the flow of the signal, the direction or the path that the signal takes. And the same is true when you're communicating ideas and giving presentations, because your idea is kind of what that signal is. And it travels a path, just like in a recording studio, where it starts off with you in your brain, and then you have to, that's where the idea signal starts. You have to get it out of your brain, out of your mouth in words that make sense, has to travel through the environment that you're speaking in, into your audience's ears and into their brain in a way that they can understand it and accept it, or not understand it and be confused. And along the way, there can be some things that can get in the way that can sort of distort your idea signal and sort of muddy the quality of it, so it doesn't really end up with the audience in the way that you intended. So we're going to talk about some noise that can get in the way. The first is credibility noise. So this is when the speaker's believability or their likability can create interference for the audience. So for example, a negative first impression. So we talked about, we talked about that a little bit earlier in the month, how important first impressions are, and that the audience learns a lot about you based on first impressions and based on how you look. And so making a negative first impression is sort of immediately throwing up a wall between you and your audience. And it can be a difficult wall to overcome and sort of get the audience back on your side. It's not impossible, but it just makes things a little bit more of a challenge for yourself. But so first impressions are important. So having a negative first impression can again, sort of make the audience feel like they may not want to listen to what you have to say. The no common ground. So not being able to find that connection with the audience in a way that they feel like they can relate to you, or that you are in a way that they feel like you understand who they are and what they need, and that you're there for them, right? So we talked about finding ways to connect with your audience in week one through things like shared experiences, common goals, qualifications, those things. If you're not able to do that relatively quick, or you want to try to do that relatively quickly, in your presentation. Find that common ground, connect with your audience so that they're invested throughout the rest of your presentation. But again, if you don't have that, then that can hurt the impact that you have. So next is imbalance in emotional appeal. So like I said, pathos being the appeal to emotion is most often the one that's utilized by people trying to convince others of something. It is the most powerful appeal because emotions are the most powerful reason why we make decisions a lot of times, even overriding our logic, right? But when you have an imbalance in emotional appeal, when you're a little too emotionally heavy-handed, then that kind of keys the audience in that to like, wait a second, now it feels like they're trying to get me to feel something emotional in a way that's kind of desperate because they're being so heavy-handed about it. And Mike here brought up the greatest example, which is one of the other videos that I included on my list, which was that Sarah McLachlan animal rescue commercial. That is the best example I could think of something that is emotionally imbalanced. It's so heavy-handed. Now, for those of you who watched the whole thing, kudos to you. Those of you who saw what it was and then was like, nope, I've seen this before, I'm not going to watch this again, that's fine too. When I'm teaching on campus and I have students in my classroom, I make them watch the entire thing. And I say, this is what it feels like. See what it's like to be intentionally emotionally manipulated. And it's so unfortunate because the message of the commercial is actually really important. It's actually a really good message and that should get out there. But the way that they package it, the way that they're communicating it, the way that they're presenting it is so emotionally heavy-handed that nobody wants to watch that. Even people who watch it for the first time, more often than not, won't watch the entire thing. Right? I've had students walk out of my class. They're like, no, I can't watch this. So that's the best example that I can find of an imbalance in emotional appeal. So you don't want to be too emotionally heavy-handed because then once the audience feels like you're trying to emotionally manipulate them, that's when things go downhill because audiences do not like to feel like you're trying to manipulate them in any way, but especially emotionally. And then credibility is not established. So we've talked about that a little bit already, making sure that upfront you're establishing that why you are a credible individual. And then if you're not communicating that, then you may not be coming across as effectively as you could be if the audience was, sure or felt confident that you were a person of authority for whatever reasons that you provide. But if you don't provide those reasons, then they may not be sure necessarily that you're a person of authority. Those are some credibility noises. The next kind is semantic noise. So this is when language and interpretation can create interference. So for example, use of too much jargon. So I included another video on the list. That was an example of technical jargon. Excuse me. It's a fantastic video, and I have to give props to the actor in that because he sold it as though those words made any sense. But basically, this is one of the reasons why it's important to know who you're talking to and who your audience is. Because if you're a professional in the music industry, right, and you're talking to a group of people who are also in the music industry, then you can probably be a little bit more free using industry terms and lingo and slang and stuff like that. Because more often than not, people who are in the industry know all of those terms and will understand what you're talking about. But if you're talking to a group of people who have never been in the music industry and don't know those kind of terms and technical things, then you want to stay away from using those kind of things with people who aren't in on that lingo, because then you're just going to confuse them. All right, so then we have too many filter words, the ums and the uhs and the like. So I'm sure many of you struggle with this. We all do a little bit, to be honest. And now, oh God, now I'm going to catch myself every time I say it. That's going to drive me nuts for the rest of the night. Okay. So here's the thing. Like it says, too many filter words. Okay. Because here's the thing. We all use filter words conversationally. the ums and the ahs and likes, we all say them when we're talking conversationally to each other, not in a formal setting. So when you're giving a speech, it's okay for there to be a couple ums, ahs, or likes. However, when there's too many of them, that's when it becomes a problem. When the audience notices that he's saying and ah or like a whole lot, that's when it's an issue. And that's when you want to try to take measures to try to pull yourself back from doing that so much. Now, to be honest, this is something that I struggled with a lot more back in the day, and something that I found that helped me out. And this is something that you guys can try if you feel like you're somebody who struggles with this, is that when you are practicing your presentation, which is always something you should do, okay, even this week before you record, practice your presentation out loud, okay? But practice your presentation. And then, if you can, try to do it in front of somebody that you feel comfortable practicing in front of, either a family member or a close friend or a significant other, somebody that you feel comfortable, who could just sit there quietly as you go through your presentation. And then what you have them do is that you ask them, just listen to me go through my presentation, and anytime you hear me say or like, just quietly raise your hand, just so it's in your vision, and then lower back down. Just so that you, as the presenter, become more aware of how often you're doing it. Because a lot of the times people aren't even aware of how often they're saying ah, or like, because it's sort of a nervous tick when it becomes too much. So a lot of people aren't even aware of how often they're doing it. And so once you make yourself more aware of how often you're doing it, then you'll get to the point where you'll be able to stop yourself from saying it, because you'll recognize what it feels like when you're about to say or like, and you can stop yourself. So once you get to the point where you can you know when you're about to say it and you can stop yourself, just stop quietly, think of the next thing you want to say, and then continue without the ums, ahs, and likes. So the more you do that, the less ums, ahs, and likes. But the more you become aware of how often you're doing it, then the easier it'll be to help yourself stop doing it so often. So 3 is visual language is distracting. So again, we talked about images and how powerful images are. But again, you need to make sure that they are accurately lining up and reflecting with the things that you're talking about as you're talking about them, and that you're not, again, you're not creating any sort of cognitive dissonance where you have opposite things going on, where you're talking about something super happy and exciting, and you have something really, an image that's really like dark and drab and dreary or sad or upsetting or anything like that. Visually, because that doesn't make sense to us that you're talking about something happy but showing us something sad. So you want to make sure that your visual language, the images that you're using, are distracting the audience from actually listening to you, and you're not showing anything that's going to take them out of the presentation to where they're thinking about something else. They're thinking about the image more than they are listening to you. All right. And the next kind is experiential noise. So this is when the speaker's delivery or the venue itself can create interference for the audience. So the first item is presentation is too long. Now this is an interesting one because it doesn't necessarily mean time-wise, like literally time-wise. Experiential noise is the experience of the audience. And so this becomes a problem or an issue when a presentation feels like it's too long. Because I'll tell you, I've sat through 4-hour presentations that felt like it was just an hour. And I've sat through 4-minute presentations that seemed like it was 4 hours. Okay. So this is why, this is one of the reasons why I always encourage you guys, why I encouraged you guys last week, when you were creating your presentation plans, to actually write out a script of what it is that you want to say in your speech. Because that will help you to keep your ideas focused and your information a little bit more fluid and flowing, and will stop you from going off on random tangents or irrelevant tangents or repeating yourself over and over, talking in circles. It will keep your message focused and always moving forward. Because those are the things that make presentations feel too long. When somebody's repeating themselves over and over, saying the same information over and over again, or going off on irrelevant tangents and is just wasting time, that's what makes a presentation feel like it's going on too long. But if your information is focused and fluid and you're engaging the audience, then it doesn't matter how long it is. The next is distracting body language. So this is an interesting one too, because much like the ums, ahs, and likes, body language things, complicated body language things are more often than not the result of nerves, nervous energy trying to get out, escape your body, basically. So here's the thing: your body communicates a lot more than your words do, right? The audience can tell a lot about you based on your body language, and a lot about how you're feeling, and about how nervous you are, about how prepared or confident you are. Your body communicates a lot. And a lot of people don't take enough time to really consider what they are physically doing with their body as they are talking. Now, like I said, more often than not, when there's a distracting body language or body tic happening, when you're doing something weird with your hands or your feet or your hair or something like that, consistently that's distracting the audience from what you're talking about, usually it's a nervous tic kind of thing. You have this nervous energy in your body, and you're so focused on what you're saying that you're not paying any attention to what you're actually physically doing. And so you maybe start doing little weird motions or movements that your body is doing sort of subconsciously to get that nervous energy out while you're so focused on what you're talking about. So for example, one of the biggest things that I see from students when they're presenting live anyway, is this sort of stationary square dance shuffle back and forth and frontwards and backwards. They're not moving anywhere. They're just sort of shuffling around in this like 2x2 square foot of space. And it's really weird. It's really weird. It's distracting because I've had students who have done that, and after we had a little feedback session afterwards, one of the other students pointed out, you're doing that weird little feet shuffle thing. And the student that was the presenter was like, I didn't even know that I was doing that. I didn't even realize that I was doing that. Because again, he was super nervous, and he was more focused on what he was talking about and not paying attention to what his body was doing. There's also a problem with people with long hair that falls in their face. Flicking their head to the side to get hair out of their eyes, or always brushing their hair back behind their ear like every 3 seconds. Those repetitive sort of nervous tic movements can be very distracting for the audience. So again, when you're rehearsing, when you're practicing, if you have somebody who is there while you're rehearsing, who's maybe looking out for ums, ahs, and likes, you can also tell them, hey, whenever you see me doing something weird with my hands or my feet or any sort of nervous tic kind of body language stuff, again, just raise your hand so that I'm aware, so that you become more aware that you're actually doing it. Sometimes pop lock before presentations. Hey man, whatever works. Get that energy out. So the third item is unprepared or unrehearsed. So this is why it's important for you to practice before you present or before you record. Rehearse your speech out loud more than once, because it's very obvious to an audience when a speaker is completely unprepared or completely unrehearsed. When it's painfully obvious that it's the very first time that speaker is going through that presentation out loud anyway, it's painfully obvious, and it can hurt your credibility in the eyes of the audience. If you clearly didn't care enough to prepare for this presentation, then why should they care about anything that you have to say? So always, 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 always practice. And then finally, poor environment. So sometimes this is something that's out of your control. This has happened to me multiple times. This is when sort of the venue itself can create interference for the audience or problems for the audience. So maybe, it's the middle of July and the AC is broken and there's, 100 people in a room and it's super uncomfortable and hot and sweaty. That is an experiential thing for the audience in their environment that's going to distract them from listening to you because they're so uncomfortable. Also the opposite way, if the AC is blasting like the Arctic freeze and everybody is, you can't hear yourself over the sound of teeth chattering, that's a distraction for the audience. And it has nothing to do with you or your presentation or the way that you're delivering things. It's just the environment itself is distracting your audience. I've had to do, I had to give a lecture once and there was construction going on, like right outside the window, like jackhammering construction. And there's nothing I could do about it, but just continue on. However, when you're in those situations, something that helps to to sort of diffuse tension a little bit. But also, it's sort of killing two birds with one stone, because you're also creating sort of an immediate connection and relatability with the audience, is just by addressing whatever the issue is, just up front. Just, if it's freezing cold, addressing that up front, like, hey, I didn't realize we were having this, presentation in Antarctica. I don't know what's going on with this, AC unit, but I'm freezing my feet off here. Just acknowledging that there's a problem that everybody is dealing with, including you, immediately creates that common ground with the audience. It's hey, this thing that is unfortunate and is bothering everybody, but we're going to get through it together, kind of thing, right? Okay. Moving on. Okay. So now we're going to switch gears a little bit and talk about creating your visuals for your presentations. And first, we're going to talk about something called visual vertigo. So visual vertigo is basically an idea that basically when there's anything in your visuals, whether it's pictures or text or what have you, anything, whether it's color combinations or patterns or animations, things that distract the audience in your visuals, and even to a point where maybe it makes them feel a little dizzy or queasy or what have you. So we're going to talk about prevent visual vertigo. Now, one of the main causes of visual vertigo is the misuse of animations. You guys love animating things, but sometimes you just don't get that you don't have to animate everything. So we're going to talk about 7 reasons you're using animation wrong. Reason number 7. Too many animations confuse the purpose. Why did that happen? You don't need to over-animate your text or objects. Okay, if you're going to animate something, just use one animation. You don't need to have it, flame in, blink out, and flash around and spin around and all that stuff. It doesn't serve any kind of purpose, and it's just distracting. Reason number 6. This is a sub-reason here, is that waiting for animations to play out before you continue eats up a lot of time. Reason number 6, the animation is unnatural or counterintuitive. So that animation, for example, can be problematic because here in the Western world, we read things from left to right. So when we see things revealed from right to left, like that sentence just did, it itches our brains a little bit. It bugs us a little bit because it's counterintuitive to the way that we actually read things. Reason number 5. The pace is frenetic, annoying, or chaotic. So hyperactive slides, much like hyperactive children, can be irritating and distracting. If the audience is paying more attention to your slides than they are to what you're saying, that's a problem. Reason number 4. The animation style is inappropriate for the content. So for example, if I was giving a presentation about forest fires, then it would probably be inappropriate to have all of my text burst into flames on my slides. I would think. Reason number 3. A sudden animation startles or confuses, why did that happen? Confuses the audience. So again, you don't want your visuals to draw attention away from what you're saying, because what you're saying is the important part. Your speech is the centerpiece of your presentation. It's what everybody should be paying attention to. Your visuals are just there to reflect the ideas sort of passively of what you're talking about in a way that will help the audience to sort of wrap their brain around what it is you're saying or the idea that you're trying to convey. And so when you have sudden things happening in your slides, it's drawing attention away from what you're actually saying. Reason number 2. I might be able to say anything I want right now, and some of you wouldn't hear it because you're paying more attention to the spinning text on the screen. Number 2, the movement distracts the audience from the presenter. I actually did that in one of my lectures, one of my campus lectures. I said reason number 2 and hit the thing, and the text started spinning. I said something ridiculous. I don't even remember what I said, but once it was done, I asked my class, how many of you heard what I just said? And only the like 2 or 3 people who were sitting immediately in front of me raised their hands because everybody else was busy paying attention to the swirling text on screen. And the number one reason you know you're using animation wrong. The animation feature is used just because. So here's the thing when it comes to animations. If you don't have a specific reason to use it, don't. And by that, I mean if you can't articulate how this animation is helping the flow of your visual information or helping the audience to understand a concept or an idea, if you don't have a specific reason that you can articulate, then don't use it. Because 9 times out of 10, animation is not used correctly. And it's ends up being more of a distraction than it does being a supportive mechanism for your presentation. So if you feel like you need to add animations to make your presentation more interesting or engaging, it's not going to. It's just going to make it more distracting. Okay. Now, one effective use of animation, oops, one, has to do with bullet points. And I know you guys like bullet points too. But here's the thing. One of the biggest problems with bullet point lists is that presenters will often show the entire list of bullet points all at once, right? But here's the problem with that. Is that if you have 4 points that you want to make, and you're going to focus on each one of them individually, and you put all 4 points up on the slide, the audience is going to read all 4 points. And so they're already going to jump ahead of you before you even start discussing point 1. They're going to read everything on the slide before you even start talking. So they already know where you're going with things. And now they're just sitting back waiting for you to actually talk through and make the points that you're making. But they already know the main points that you're making over the next however long you're talking because you've shown them all 4 points. An effective use of animation with bullet points is that if you have a list, show them 1 bullet point at a time. That way you're keeping the audience focused on what you need them to be focused on in the moment. So if you're going to talk about point 1 for a minute, only show the point 1 bullet point and then talk about it. And then when you're done, then move on to point 2. So they're only focusing on what you want them to focus on in the moment and not just leaving it open for them to read all at once. So that is an effective use of animations, is having bullet points dissolve in one by one when you do have a list of bullet points. I hate bullet points, and more often than not, I find that you don't ever really need bullet points in this style of presentation or the format of presentation that you guys are doing for the Brand Yourself presentations. In other forms of presentations, bullet points are often necessary, but for what you guys are doing, more often than not, you don't even need bullet points because you want the audience focused on what you're talking about, and you want your visuals to visually reflect those and not have it just be text that the audience reads off the slide. All right, now something else that is super critical and important when it comes to visuals, and again, something that a lot of people don't really take into account, is color. And how much color is important. How much different colors evoke ideas and moods and feelings from the audience. It could be the difference between a bomb or a bauble. The difference between an iceberg and a shark. Or a moon and a Death Star. Or sunset and an igloo. Color is important because you want to make sure that the color schemes that you're using, number one, are not causing visual vertigo. That you don't have like hot pink text on an electric green background. It just makes people's eyeballs want to explode out of their head. But colors that represent and evoke the feelings and ideas and moods that you're trying to get across to your audience, and not the opposite of those things unintentionally. So what I'm going to show you guys is actually a really cool website that I'm going to drop the link to down in the chat box here. And then I'll also send this along with the recording of tonight's session. Where'd it go? There it is. Okay. So real quick, let me bring this up. And there it is down in the chat box. Color Theory 101. So this is a great resource to have on hand because it basically goes through the basics of color theory, right? It talks about the different types of color combinations, primary, secondary. Shows you how to use a color wheel effectively, which a lot of people don't understand. Go away, ad. So analogous colors, triads, complementaries, all that stuff. And then toward the bottom, color meanings, because colors mean things. We associate certain ideas and concepts and moods and feelings with certain colors. So red, for example, right? Red is the color of love and passion. Boxes of candies are red on Valentine's Day. It's also the color of anger and blood. Red and orange and yellow are all found in fire. Red can also mean danger, like stop signs or red lights. So it's an attention-grabbing color. That's how we associate that. Red is sort of a dominant attention-grabbing color. When you combine it with colors like black, it can create a very masculine look. So you want to be careful how you use red, because, like I said, red is a very dominant sort of attention-grabbing color. So you don't want to be too heavy-handed with the red in your designs. The same thing with red, or excuse me, orange. Orange represents warmth, but isn't as aggressive as red is. It can also portray a fun atmosphere because it is energetic, creates a sense of warmth without association or associated connotations of danger and blood, the way that red does. It can also be associated with health because of things such as vitamin C, which is found in oranges. So orange there are certain ideas, certain moods and feelings that we associate with these colors. Yellow is another one. Yellow is a hard color to work with, to be honest. I personally try to stay away from yellow as much as possible. It's a very dominant color that can be difficult to work with. But that has its own set of meanings. Same as green and blue and purple, and even the default slide colors that I know you guys like, simple white and black. Even those things, white is associated. Color white is associated with a lot of things. Same is with the color black. Mostly associated with death because it represents decay due to rot. Black can also represent evil. It can represent anxiety due to darkness and the unknown. However, when you combine it with colors like silver or gray, it can represent sophistication, such as the image that's shown beneath it. So again, don't just haphazardly default to white or black or to a template design from PowerPoint or Keynote or what have you. Really consider what colors you should use for your presentation. What colors would best sort of visually encapsulate the main ideas and concepts that you're trying to communicate. So color is super important. So aside from that, you're also going to be using images in your presentations, right? So we're going to talk about that. So we've all heard a picture is worth 1,000 words. In fact, I'm pretty sure I said it earlier tonight. So here's the thing. If a picture is worth 1,000 words, then you don't need to put a picture and 1,000 words all on the same slide. So we're going to talk about visual design. Now, another one of the videos on the list was a TED Talk from this gentleman, Mr. Chip Kidd, called Designing Books is No Laughing Matter, ... Okay, it is. So this gentleman is the man, the guy, the one, the only, the guy who designed the T-Rex silhouette that is used in all of the Jurassic Park branding. He's the guy who designed the book cover for Jurassic Park. And in the video, he talks about basically about that process and what he does, because he designs book covers for a living. And he talks about what his experience designing the Jurassic Park book cover and coming up with that T-Rex silhouette idea, and what's basically the things that he considers when he's trying to figure out how to visually represent the story of the book that he's designing for, how to represent that visually on the cover in a way that's intriguing and eye-grabbing, but that in a way that makes sense for the story. And he also talks a little bit about how he designs and how he doesn't design, and things that he learned while he was going through his graphic design education. And he shared a very important lesson that I want to share with you guys. It's a very, very simple idea, but it's about simplifying your visuals, basically. And it goes like this. You can show an audience a picture of an apple. You can show an audience the word apple. But do not ever show an audience a picture of an apple with the word apple. That is treating your audience like they are idiots. Okay? So you want to avoid visual redundancies in your visuals and in your slides, right? If you have a picture of something, you don't also need text that labels what that picture is. Especially if in your speech, you are going to be saying what that thing is that's in the picture that's showing. You don't need a picture of it and a text of it, or text labeling what it is, and then also you saying what it is in your speech. That's redundant. So you don't want to overcrowd your visuals with things. Overcrowding does not add to clarity. Now, what I'm going to show you next, I believe it was 2010, Time Magazine awarded this next image as the worst PowerPoint slide ever created. Check this out. Look at that. Now, on the face of it, you may have looked at that immediately and thought, oh, this all must make sense in some way. However, it does not. And I've tried on multiple occasions to follow the arrows around and see where they go and what connects to what. No, it doesn't make any sense. Now, apparently, this slide was supposedly supposed to explain counterinsurgency strategy in Afghanistan all on one slide. And supposedly, David Petraeus was furious when he saw this slide because it was so unintelligible and ultimately worthless. But think about this. Also, look down there at the bottom corner. Working draft version 3. I can't even imagine what the other working drafts look like. Think about how much time and effort went in some poor soul or group of souls spent just wasted making this slide. Utterly useless. So don't overcrowd your slides with things, okay? You don't need to. And here's the thing. And another reason, one of the reasons why people tend to do that is for some reason they have hesitation about the number of slides they have in their slide deck or in their PowerPoint project or whatever. And I will tell you right now, the number of slides does not matter at all. Do not be afraid to have a lot of slides. Because as long as your information is flowing naturally and in a way that's you're engaging the audience isn't going to care how many slides you have. Actually, let me ask you guys right now, from the beginning of this presentation, how many slides do you think I've gone through so far up to this point in the last hour? It says 8, Willie says 35, got 7, 25, 15 to 20. Nope. I am on slide number 48 of 71. So I don't want you to worry about, I don't want to have too many slides. Too many slides is not a thing. If you're effectively, if you're creating your slides effectively. Because again, if the audience is engaged and they're listening and they're invested and your visual information is flowing from point to point in a way that lines up with what you're talking about and it's making sense, then the audience doesn't care, isn't even going to think about, man, I wonder how many slides he has. Nobody cares as long as you're being effective. So we're going to do a little practice around here of simplifying your visuals. All right, so I'm going to show you a slide. We're going to pretend I'm giving a presentation, like a 3-second presentation. I'm going to show you a slide, and I'm going to give you a line of speech, trying to communicate an idea. And I want you to just tell me if you think my visual slide effectively communicates the idea that I tell you. All right, so here we go. Ready? I have a lazy cat. End scene. Okay, so I told you I have a lazy cat, and I showed you this slide. Does this effectively communicate that idea? Or could I do something to make it better for the audience? Okay, so let's see. So all right, so Terrence says too many pics. All right, so I got 6 pictures of my cat, but that's too much. Let's see what else I got. Black text doesn't work against the background. Ooh, so yeah, so I have text that also says that I have a lazy cat, but we're also kind of losing the word lazy a little bit because it's dark text that's sort of blending a little with the dark color of the image that it's sitting on top of. So we're kind of losing the word lazy a little bit, so we can clearly see what that says. Okay, so that's a problem. Okay, well, let me see if I can clean this up a little bit. So I agree. I think there's too many pictures because I have 6 pictures that are all visually communicating the exact same idea of a lazy cat. And actually, one of them that's even debatable. The one of me over on the left with the cat on my lap. That could be I'm lazy. Um, so really, only 5 other pictures that are completely focused on the cat. However, I don't need that many pictures all communicating the exact same idea. That's visual redundancy. So let's clean this up a little bit. Also, there's a little problem of organization, visual design. This looks like I just found 6 pictures and vomited them onto my slide because they're all overlapping each other. There's not really any organization or structure to any of this. All just kind of thrown on the slide. So let's clean it up a little bit. So get rid of half the images, rearrange the images so they look a little bit more organized, a little bit more structured. Now you can clearly read the text. So if I came out and said, I have a lazy cat, and I showed you this slide, does this effectively communicate the idea of I have a lazy cat, or can I simplify this even further for the audience? Logan says he likes it. Kitten says can be improved even more. Roy says one simple picture. Just as well works better than the last one. Okay, Terrence says maybe take out the first pic. Okay, so I still have 3 pictures, and they're all basically communicating the same idea. Do I need 3 pictures to do that, or could I do that with just 1 picture? That clearly does that. I agree, Jordan. I like the one where he's laying on the laptop too. Now, I also still have the issue of the text. Do I need the text if I myself am telling you in my speech I have a lazy cat? Does it also need to be written out on the slide? No. So let's clean this up more. Let's get rid of the text, get rid of the other images. Now, does this work as it is, or is there something else I could do to improve this image? Roy says full screen. That's right. Blow it up. Boom. Now, if I say I have a lazy cat and show you this one picture of my cat using my computer as a pillow, does that effectively communicate that idea? Yes, it does. So I hope you learned something from this little lesson, okay? Simplify your visuals. You don't need a ton of images all communicating the same idea, especially if you're talking about that or addressing that idea in your speech. Now, this is another reason why when you're looking for images to use that you want to use or want to find and use high resolution images. Because when you use low resolution images, if you enlarge the image like that on your slide, it's going to get pixelated and distorted, and you'll be able to see all the little individual pixels and that stair step effect that happens on the pictures if you have low resolution ones. So you want them to be high resolution because you want your images to be crisp and clear, right? So my rule of thumb when it comes to images is very simple, and it's this: one image per idea, one idea per slide. That gives your audience a single thing to focus on while you're talking about a single thing. When you're done talking about that thing and that image no longer applies to what you're talking about, then you move on to talking about the next thing, and another image should appear that reflects whatever it is that you're talking about. But it gives the audience one single thing to focus on. All right, so images are very, very important, and you want to be very careful how you utilize them and how you arrange them and organize them on your slides. Something else that is also incredibly important in your visuals when you do use text, if you're going to, is typeface, font choice. And I feel like this image pretty clearly represents that lesson. So make sure that you're using a font that we can clearly read, easily read. You don't need super fancy, swirly script text that looks super fancy but is impossible to read. The audience should never have to squint at your visuals and go, what does that say? Okay, so fonts matter. All right. So now we're going to switch gears again and talk about vocal delivery, which again you're all doing this week as you record your audio narration for your first drafts. So we're going to focus on this a little bit. Now, last week, for the emotional storytelling discussion board, you guys should have watched the Julian Treasure TED Talk, How to Speak So That People Will Listen, right? And in that, he talks about the various aspects of the vocal toolbox. He talks about the hail ideas, even gives you some vocal warm-ups, some things to do, things to avoid, so that you know how to speak so that people will want to listen. So those are all very important ideas. And I'm going to share a few more with you this evening. Now, let me ask, has anybody in here ever done any kind of like live theater or live performance, any like formal public speaking where you're talking to a crowd, anything like that, where you are in front of an audience delivering information? Okay, so some of you yes, some of you no, that's fine. Well, I did theater for many, many, many years. And for those of you who don't know, and maybe some of you do know this, but for those of you who don't, in every performance, every public speaking engagement or event, every live event, there's this little old couple that comes to every show. And they're very, very old. And their hearing is, it's not so good. And for some reason, they always decide to sit in the very last row at the back of the room. And I don't know why, but it's it's their life. That's what they do. But they come to every show, every performance, every event, and they sit in the back row with their being just sit there being hard of hearing. And so as the speaker or as the performer, as whoever it is that's delivering information, it is your responsibility to make sure that that little old couple can clearly hear and understand every word that is coming out of your mouth. That is your responsibility. So it's important, as Julian Treasure shared, to warm up your voice when you're doing, before you speak, or before you record. Warm up your voice. Now, part of that is articulation, speaking clearly. How well you enunciate your words, not slurring or stuttering words. Articulation is very important. So I'm going to share with you some of my favorite articulation exercises. And there are literally thousands of them out there if you do a short Google search. But these are some of my favorite ones. And if you can do them, if you practice them before you record, before you rehearse, before you present, they should help you to be able to speak more clearly. So the first one has to do with consonant combinations. So if you're not speaking clearly enough, or if you're not articulating clearly enough, there are certain combinations of consonant sounds that are distinct different sounds, but the way in which your mouth produces those sounds are almost identical. So if you're not articulating them clearly enough, your audience might not hear them correctly. So K and G, for example. K makes the sound K, G makes the sound G. Now, if you do it yourself, I recommend that you do, just real quick, K and G, pay attention to how your mouth forms that noise. The back of your tongue is probably pressed up against the back of your mouth to make the K and the G. Two very distinct sounds, but the way that your mouth produces them is almost identical. So you need to make sure that you're enunciating clearly, articulating clearly, so that your K doesn't get mistaken for a G or vice versa, and then confusing the audience when they think that you said a word that doesn't exist. So K and G, K and G, T and D as well, T and D, when your tip of your tongue is more forward on the back of your teeth to make both of those sounds. And same thing with P and B, P and B. Distinct different sounds, but the way your mouth makes them is almost identical. So practicing them back to back like this can help you to more clearly articulate distinctly those two consonant sounds. So K, 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 G, 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 T, 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 D, 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 P, 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 B, B, B. And with all of these, you always want to start out slow. One word at a time, one sound at a time. And then you slowly speed it up. And if you can do it at conversational speed, if you're speaking it clearly at conversational speed, then you're good to go. So K, 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 G, 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 T, 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 D, 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 P, 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 B, B, B. And it may sound ridiculous and feel silly doing it, but it really does help. And I hope you're doing these along with me. They are fun. Okay, moving on to the next one. So this one is for those wah wah kind of words. So 1-1 was a racehorse. 2-2 was 1-2. When 1-1 won one race, 2-2 won 1-2. So always starting off slow, one word at a time, and then slowly speed it up until you can clearly speak it at conversational speed. 1-1 was a racehorse. 2-2 was 1-2. When 1-1 won one race, 2-2 won 1-2. All right, now we're going to kick it up a notch. Next one's a little bit more advanced. So this one is for all those st kind of sounds and words. So you want to be very deliberate in hitting the beginning and the end of each word. That st thing. So amidst the mist and coldest frost, with barest wrists and stoutest boast, he thrusts his fists against the post and still insists he sees the ghosts. Now, this one specifically is used a lot in speech therapy for people who have lisps and stutters. I think there might be more to this one. But yeah. So, amidst the mist and coldest frost, with barest wrists and stoutest boast, he thrusts his fists against the post and still insists he sees the ghosts. You might need a napkin or paper towel to wipe up a little bit. All right, now I'm going to kick it up one more time. Now, this next one, it looks simple at the face of it, but it's actually one of the more difficult ones. Which wristwatch is the Swiss wristwatch? Which wristwatch is the Irish wristwatch? Go ahead and try. And let me know if you successfully did it your first time. She said, nope. How many of you tripped up on the transition from the word Irish to wristwatch? Usually comes out Irish wristwatch, something like that. Yep. It's a hard turn from Irish to wristwatch. That's why I said you gotta take it slow, one word at a time, and then slowly speed it up. So which wristwatch is the Swiss wristwatch? Which wristwatch is the Irish wristwatch? But don't give up, because again, it's just a practice tool, right? It's something to help you get better. So again, before you record your narration this week, practice it out loud. Also time yourself while you're practicing, because that will clue you in pretty clearly as to whether you're falling within the 3 to 4 minute time limits, okay? But practice it out loud and warm up your voice before you do. Try out some of these articulation exercises, or find some others that you prefer. Because, like I said, there are literally thousands of them out there. A brief Google search for tongue twisters will yield many, many results. Okay. Time we're running. Okay, that's not bad. All right. And that brings me to the Brand Yourself presentation first draft assignment. All right. I know you're all excited. So, so for this assignment, at this point, you should know what the presentation is about because you spent all last week planning for it, right? So again, just to recap, you are imagining in our hypothetical scenario that you are a recent graduate from your degree program and you are pitching yourself to a potential employer from your chosen industry. So things that the first draft must have. Number one, time limits. We've got 3 to 4 minutes, all right? No less than 3, no more than 4. So again, time yourself as you practice your speech out loud, and that'll let you know whether you need to add on some stuff or whether you need to edit some stuff out, or whether you're falling within that sweet spot. So 3 to 4 minutes. Must have recorded audio narration over your accompanying visuals, not separate files. So not a PowerPoint file and an audio file of your narration. They need to be together. Excuse me. Synchronized audio-visual presentation. There needs to be the clear structure and flow. So again, you should already have that because you should have worked that out last week in your presentation plan, right? There needs to be a clear structure to your information. So basically what I want you to think, I want you to keep in mind this week as you're doing your first draft is I want you to consider, I want you to basically treat it like it's your final submission. Just because it says first draft doesn't mean that, oh, I'll just do like half of it and I'll be fine. Like, no, you want to get as much of it done this week as you possibly can. Like, you want to get it as close to being perfect the way you want it to be this week, because that's going to make next week go so much easier for you when you're doing your final submission next week. So treat this like it's your final submission. Get as much of it done as you possibly can, but there should be a completed version of it with a full beginning, middle, end audio and visuals. Even if there's maybe some stuff that you didn't quite get to do or didn't get to tweak as finely as you would have liked to this week, you'll have time to do it next week, but try to get as much as you possibly can to get it to a completed final version state, because that's going to make next week go so much easier for you. Okay, so things to avoid. Things that I would recommend that you avoid. Some of these are some personal pet peeves of mine, but just some general things to avoid. Don't tell the audience what they're thinking. So avoid things in your speech that are like, you're probably wondering by now, who am I? Or why am I the best thing? Or I bet you're asking yourself this. Don't do that. Because you're not face-to-face with the people. So you're not actually like talking to them. And the problem with saying, I know what you're thinking, is that you could be wrong. Because if you say, I know what you're thinking this, and your audience is not actually thinking that, and they're thinking something completely different, then that's going to kind of shows a a little bit of out of touchness on your part if you're saying that you know what they're thinking, but that's not actually what they're thinking. So don't do that. Next is, don't act like you're in a face-to-face meeting. So you're not. You're making a recorded audio-visual presentation, so treat it that way. You don't need to introduce yourself as though you're face-to-face and say things like, oh, I'm so glad to see all these smiling faces out here. Or I'm so glad that everybody could join me today. And I have pamphlets and packets of information that I'm going to hand out to you, because you're not actually doing that. Okay? Treat it for what it is. It's a recorded audiovisual presentation. You could think of it like you're going to make this and you're going to send this to your company, and they're going to watch it themselves without you there in the room. Think of it like that. Yeah, it's weird. It's weird when you act like you're in a face-to-face meeting when it's clearly pre-recorded. Now, you also want to avoid any presentation tool that will not allow you to add audio. So want to make sure that before you commit to whatever tool you're using, that you know for a fact that you can add audio or record audio, depending on what tool you're using. But double check before you commit to your tool. All right, whatever presentation tool you're using, whether it's PowerPoint or Keynote, whether you're making a video, whether you're using an online tool, especially if it's an online tool, double check to make sure that it will allow you to add audio, because not every online presentation tool allows you to do that. Google Slides, for example, while it's a great and convenient tool, it does not allow you to add audio in the presentation itself or record audio over it. There's an extra step and piece of software that you have to make that work. So again, double check before you commit. That way you don't get, you build all of your visuals and then go to record your audio and realize that you have to choose a different thing because whatever tool you chose doesn't allow you to do that. Caitlin asked, what about Adobe Spark? Adobe Spark works. I love Adobe Spark. The video tool allows you to create a narrated slideshow of images. It is perfect for this assignment. Absolutely. Okay. Now, when it comes to recording your audio, aside from warming up your voice and rehearsing and all that kind of stuff, make sure that you have the capability to record audio, okay? Because I know not every computer comes with a built-in microphone or anything like that. You may not have a microphone, but there are ways to work around that. If you have a phone, like a smartphone, almost every smartphone comes with its own voice memo app pre-installed. If not, you can download a free one from any app store, basically. And you can record your audio on your phone and then just email the file to yourself to get it to whatever device you need it on, so that you can add it to your presentation. But there are ways around that. Logan asked, so should I record this on Adobe Spark? You can, absolutely. That's up to you. It's up to what tool you want to use. But Adobe Spark will allow you to record narration over your images. Okay. So like I said, your audio needs to be included with your visuals in the same project, whether it's slides or video or an online presentation tool. Synchronize with your visuals. Now, if you are using a slide presentation tool such as Keynote or PowerPoint, the other thing that I'm going to put out there is that everything needs to play and transition automatically. Okay. So whoever's watching it, basically, which is going to be me, but hypothetically, the company that you would be sending it to, right? All we should have to do is press play on your presentation and then sit back and watch it play out from beginning to end. So we shouldn't have to click through your slides or click on your audio files and play each individual one just to get through your presentation. We should be able to hit play, sit back, and watch the whole thing from beginning to end automatically. If you don't know how to do that, I will come back to that in a moment, because there are ways to learn, and it's very easy. Also, when you are submitting your presentations, again, if you are doing a slide presentation of some kind, do not submit a PDF of your slides. because there will be no audio. So if you build your slides in PowerPoint and you record your audio and everything's there and synchronized and good to go, and you save it as a PDF and send it to me, it'll have all the slides, but it's not going to have any of your audio. Okay, so I just want to make sure nobody does that. Just submit the actual project file. Now, for those of you creating an online presentation using either Adobe Spark or Prezi or eMaze or what have you, yeah. Do not attempt to download the presentation files from that site. Okay, you do not need to download anything. All you need to do is make sure the sharing functions are set to public, and all of those online presentation tools have a function where you can share your presentation and send a link to somebody. So all I got to do is copy and paste the share link into a text document and then submit that text document to the assignment page. So that all we have to do is copy and paste your link into our browser, and it will take us directly to your presentation online. Josh asked, what would I say if I'm using PowerPoint? It's whatever the PowerPoint file is. It's like .pptx or ppt, whatever that file, what the PowerPoint file extension is. It's that. That's what you would submit. Okay, so again, for those of you who don't know how to edit transitions and make things automatically go and play, lynda.com. Lynda.com can show you. Also, Google. It's amazing how many students don't use Google. I know because you're told your whole educational career, like, don't use Google. But when it comes to things like this, like if you don't know how to add an audio file to a PowerPoint presentation, or if you don't know how to record your audio in the actual PowerPoint software, you can just Google that question and you'll get like a bajillion answers that will that will show you how very easily. But if you're looking for something a little bit more concrete, professional, lynda.com has the answers you need. There are a ton of easy to follow tutorials for PowerPoint and for Keynote and for Prezi and for Google Slides and all kinds of stuff. So Anthony asks, can we use Premiere Pro? Yes, absolutely. Which brings me to video presentations. So if you're not going to do a slide presentation and you're choosing to do a video presentation instead, which is fantastic and awesome, that's totally cool. Here's some things. We're going to talk about this a little bit. So first, yes, Anthony, you can use Premiere Pro. You can use any software that you're familiar and comfortable with using. So with video presentations, all right, I'm going to show by example a few things. And you're going to get to see me. Yay. Okay, so a couple things to keep in mind. Hello. When you are recording yourself for video presentations, okay? First off, framing, okay? This right here is pretty easy, simple framing for a video where you're talking to the camera, right? You're not too big in the frame, you're not too small in the frame. Your head is in the upper half of the frame space, not like down here in the lower half like this. My head isn't perfectly centered in the frame, leaving all this dead empty space around me. Just a little bit of headroom, centered. This is good for talking. So framing is important because you don't want to be like too super far away, and you don't want to be like up close, like, hey guys, we're going to talk about some stuff, because that's an awkward closeness for something like this. So yeah. So keep it framed simply. Now with your camera, what you want to make sure that you do is when you're recording that you are able to put the camera up at your eye level so that you're looking directly into the camera and that you're not looking like down on it like this, where we're seeing up your nose and a ceiling fan spinning behind your head, which I get a lot of those, so please avoid that. Or any other kind of like weird angle. Like you want to, basically what you're doing is visually on a subconscious level, you're putting yourself on the same level as your audience. It's like you're looking them directly in the eye kind of thing. You're not looking down on them in a condescending way. You're not looking up at them in a weird way. You're just looking straight on directly in their eyes. So if you can, by whatever means you have or whatever kind of camera you're using, if you can set it up to where it's at your eye level and you're looking directly into it, that's going to work out best. Next, be aware before you record. Just take a look around, see what's going on behind you in the background. Make sure there's nothing weird happening or any like weird things moving around back there or people walking back and forth or anything like that. Basically, you want to make sure there's nothing distracting happening behind you, because I got a video presentation from a student last year, and he was recording. I think he was recording in the living room of his apartment, and he had the camera set up in the corner facing outwards, into the living room. And the student was recording himself, and so you could see his entire living room and like kitchen in the background. And throughout the entire video, in the far background, you could see his roommate pacing back and forth across the entire frame, arguing, and you could hear him arguing on the phone with his mom the entire time. And it was very distracting. So just take a look around, make sure there's nothing weird going on behind you. Again, if you're going to film yourself in your room, like clean things up a little bit. I probably should have cleaned up a little bit more tonight, but clean things up a little bit. Like don't have like a wreck of a room behind you as you're talking. Remember, trying to come across as professional, right? Yeah. Sheena, you know what I'm talking about. The cats are out of the room. So yeah, so make sure you know what's going on behind you. Also, if you are, you want to be aware of what you're wearing in regard to what is behind you. So if you're filming yourself like up against a wall, maybe, or like next to a wall or something, and the wall is like a dark color, and you yourself are wearing like a dark colored shirt, you probably want to reverse that, because I had another student who was recording himself in kind of a dimly lit room, but he had black curtains behind him, and he was wearing a black shirt, so he was just kind of this floating head talking in black space because his shirt was blending in with the black curtains behind him. There was no distinction. He didn't have like a kicker light on him or anything like that. So you want to make sure that you are standing out clearly from your background. So if you're recording in front of a dark background, wear something that's a little more brighter or colorful so that you stand out a little bit more. Also, if you're doing a video presentation, you still need to include images and visuals. It should not be 3 to 4 minutes of just this, you staring into a camera and talking for 3 to 4 minutes straight. You still need to include images and things like that that reflect what you're talking about, whether it's full screen images or whether you can put in like picture-in-picture kind of things, which for those of you in my class, I sent out a link with an example of a video that I did that I'll show you, that shows you an example of how to do that. So yes, there's that, and then I feel like there was something else. Oh, lighting. It's important that we can see you clearly, right? So you want to make sure that you are lit in such a way with whatever lights that you have at your disposal that we can clearly see you. You don't ever want to record yourself sitting in front of a open window like during the day where it's brighter outside than it is inside, because then that'll just throw you completely into silhouette and we won't be able to see you at all. So if you're like, you can turn into the window so the light from the window is on your face while you're recording so we can see you, that's fine. But just make sure that we can clearly see your face as you're talking. That's important. Anthony asks, can we do an audio only with images on Premiere Pro? Yes, you can import images into Premiere Pro and then basically line them up on the timeline like a slideshow and then add your audio over it. Yes, you can do that. All right, so background, lighting, images, framing. Talking head. I feel like I'm missing something. No, I guess that's it. Okay. Oh, well, no. I have something else, but I'll come back to show you, which is actually right now. Okay, so we're doing a video presentation. Things to keep in mind for a video presentation. Number one, no vertical videos, please. I'm back with this. Vertical video is when you record a video holding your phone like this, vertically. This is world star position, not professional video position. This is vertical video. This is bad. This is horizontal video, which is how all movies and TV and professional videos are made, horizontally. Okay? Those of you who watch the list of videos, there's a video specifically about that called vertical video syndrome. Do not record this way. Okay? Record this way. That's how it's done. No vertical videos. So no vertical videos. But again, just like if you are using a online presentation tool, you do not need to submit the actual video file. Please upload the file to the video to YouTube. Change the privacy settings to either public or unlisted. And then copy and paste the YouTube link into a text document and submit the text document. That way, all we have to do, copy and paste your YouTube link into our browser, and it will take us directly to your video online. And your video file won't be taking up hard drive space on my computer. So it's a win-win. Okay. I feel like there was something else. Oh! Music. I forgot to talk about music. So music, background music, can add a huge emotional impact to your presentation. So if you're doing a video presentation, actually this works for slide presentations as well. You can add background music to a slide presentation. I would recommend thinking about adding background music because it is, like, again, it adds another level of emotional engagement for your audience. And it really can change the entire tone of your presentation. Actually, I had a student who turned in his first draft, and it was an excellent first draft. He had all the information, he had great visuals, he had great structure and great vocal delivery and everything like that. But it was a silent presentation. There wasn't any music to it. And so I suggested that he add a background music track for his final submission. Because while his first draft was good, like he had all the right stuff, it was just a little bit sterile and a little bit stale, I guess. And so for his final submission, all he changed was he added background music to it. And it changed the entire thing. And it was like 10 times better. It was ridiculous how much of an impact that had. So here's my thing with music. Excuse me. You want to make sure that you're using music that's appropriate for the context of your presentation, right? You don't ever want to use music that has lyrical content. So you don't ever want to use music that has somebody singing in it. Because the problem is that we're going to hear somebody singing while we're also trying to listen to you talk. And so you don't want, here's the thing, an audience they're only going to listen to the person singing or they're going to listen to you talk. An audience can't do both at the same time. So you don't want to ever give them the option to not listen to you talk, because that's the purpose of the presentation. Okay. So avoid that by adding instrumental music. Excuse me. Now you want to make sure that the volume of the music is not so loud that it's competing with the volume of your voice, because if your music is too loud and we can't hear you over the background music, then that becomes a problem. So it's background music, so keep the volume in the background, but loud enough that we can clearly hear it. It doesn't need to be so far in the background that we can't even tell that there's background music. So you want to make sure the tone of it is appropriate and goes along with and is matching basically the style of your presentation. Music is one of those things that you want to be careful with pathos-wise, though, because again, music is very emotional, and so you want to make sure that you're not using music that is too emotionally heavy-handed, kind of thing that seems a little too grandiose for the scale of what you're actually talking about. You don't want to go too overboard with the background music. style-wise. Just keep it something that's light and upbeat, and not dark and depressing, unless for some reason that's the vibe that you're going for, in which case that's a stylistic choice and that's up to you. Um, but yeah, it's just something simple and upbeat in the background, and it adds something completely different, a whole different level of engagement for your audience, and it really makes a huge difference. So I would recommend that. Now, as students, you have access to the Westar Music Database, which is available through the library page on the Connect site. For those of you in my class, I sent out an announcement yesterday that has information about that and a little video for how to access that. For those of you in Ms. Heaney's class, if she hasn't talked about that already, I'll send something along with the archive video of this evening's session. But it's a fantastic resource because it has tons and tons and tons and tons and tons and tons and tons of music files of all kinds of genres of music, all kinds of moods and themes, and it's all free for you guys. So yeah, I would use that a lot if I were you. But yeah, definitely check that out through the audience, or through the library page on Connect. It's in the list of databases. All right. I think that might be it. Did this? Yep, there we go. All right. So does anybody have any questions about anything we talked about tonight, or about the assignments, or anything like that? Or is everybody good? Okay, if you're good, then awesome. Oh, what was the library site again? It's on the Full Sail Connect website. You can just search in the search tool thing at the top, just library, and it'll bring up the Full Sail's library page. Okay, Willie, I'll look out for that. All right. Well, if you don't have any other big questions or anything like that, that's fine. But please don't hesitate to ask if one pops up throughout the week. Again, remember that we're not always available over the weekends to help out with things or to answer questions or emails. So make sure that you're working on this throughout the week to give yourself time to run into problems and time to need help and guidance and clarification before the weekend, so we can help you out as much as we can. But I am looking forward to seeing your guys' first drafts. I was very pleased with the presentation plans that I got. All of you should have your grades and feedback on your presentation plans also by now. So definitely read the feedback if you have not yet, and adjust whatever you need to adjust for the first draft. And I think that's it. I guess there's no due date for posting our first draft to the discussion board or making an initial post, right? No, there's not. On the 3.3 discussion board, no. No, there's no deadlines for that. Caitlin asks, I struggle with pinpointing my main point / star moment in my first drafts. Can I have some tips on how to improve that? That's a little bit. I don't know. It's kind of a difficult question to answer without having all of your information of your from your plan and everything. Hmm. Well, I'm sorry. It's such a that's such a case by case kind of thing. Um, I would say the one thing that you well, actually, hold on a second. Okay, so excuse me. I would say, well, the one thing you want to keep in mind when it comes to star moments um, is number one, you want to keep it to one moment. And a lot of people try to put in multiple star moments, um, but you want to try to keep it to one because it's star moment, not star moments. The more you try to include, the less impact each one has, kind of thing. Um, but it kind of, yeah, that's a difficult question to answer without knowing what your stuff is, um, because it really depends on what it is that you're trying to do, and that kind of dictates what the main point and message of your presentation is. Which, depending on what that is, uh, may may or may not clue into what the best star moment to go with would be. Because they all kind of work differently for different ideas and uh, uh, different messages. So I guess elaborate is keeping my thoughts straight. I get multiple ideas as I go along. Um, oh, as you're saying, the and then trap. Yeah, yeah, you want to avoid that. So again, yeah, if you find that you're kind of if it's easy for you to be a little long winded on things and maybe like over explain things or over elaborate things, um, again, number one, writing out your speech word for word so you know exactly what you're going to say. That'll help you avoid the and then stuff, and help you keep it more focused on the main idea of your presentation, instead of going into unnecessary depth of detail on certain things. Um, yeah, welcome. I hope that helped. I feel like that wasn't really a helpful answer. Okay. Yes, Brandon, the session is over. If you'd like to leave, that's fine. I'll go back and see if I missed anybody's comments. Oh, she's still in here. Somebody else had a question. Oh, is it Vanessa or Wanisha? You're coming about doing it on your phone. Um, what kind of phone do you have? The iPhone, Android, Google phone? Ah, iPhone 6 Plus. Awesome. So since you have an iPhone, you can use the Adobe Spark app. They have a app for their video feature called Spark Video, and it's just Adobe Spark in a mobile app. Um, but it's a free app, and it'll let you create your narrated slideshow right on your phone. So I'll actually put that down there. So yeah, you just look up Spark Video on the on the App Store. They should be. I know they're working for. I think they're working on a beta version for Android phones, but they have not released that yet. Okay. Well, like I said, the Adobe Spark or the Spark Video app will let you do both. Will let you record and build your slideshow, and I think it'll also let you add music. You're welcome. All right. Jordan said, just heard your feedback on my breakdown, and I'm a little confused on how I can improve it. Means I didn't completely understand the star thing. The star moment. Okay, so are you saying that you don't understand well, actually, here, hold on a second. I'm gonna go ahead and stop recording for everyone else. We'll stick around and chat.